Hello everyone, this is Iris from MeritSun Power. Today we're going to talk about how to improve the success rate of the communication between inverter and batteries. The reason for talking about this topic is that some customers will encounter the communication failure when doing some communication work with some brands. So this time we're going to sort out the factors that will affect the communication failure and try to achieve one step in place communication by mastering communication-related elements. The factors that affect the communication between inverter and batteries will be divided into 4 factors, which is mainly 2 aspects. One is the hardware section, which including dialing the code, protocol selection, and the communication wiring. The other section is the software section, which mainly involves whether the protocol exists and is selected on the software of the BMS. Let's start with the hardware section. Firstly, we talk about the communication wiring. As you can see, the communication wiring looks the same as the internet cables on the surface. However, there are various definitions of this cable for different brands of inverter and batteries, and the definition will directly affect the communication value. But how does it work and affect the communication? As we know, each brand has different definitions for their communication cable. Take our brands as an example. The patch cable is generally a pin. The definition for our CAN communication cable is made as pin 4 is H and pin 5 is L. On the other hand, the definition for the RS485 communication cable is made as pin 1 is B and pin 2 is A. Only the same definition of the cable can realize the communication between the inverter and batteries. And the word can't ignore is that sometimes the inverter can communicate with the batteries on both CAN communication ports and the RS485 communication ports. The key still depends on which communication ports the wiring is made for. The above is the information about the cable. Secondly, we should also pay attention to the dialing programs on the hardware part, which is almost the most intuitive of all factors. If you can correctly understand the definition of dialing the code, then you will be more handy. First of all, the purpose of dialing the code is to assign an ID to each battery, which is similar to our ID card. In the process of the management of the entire battery system, it must know that the signal of which batteries it comes from. That's why we need to assign an ID to the battery. Based on this, you can also understand that the ID cannot be repeated, which is the same as the dial, and the logic of the dial confirms the law of binary, which means for 4 dial codes, it will have 16 dial numbers for you to choose from. Usually, you can ask your suppliers for the guidance of dialing the codes, or you can search the binary law on the internet and follow that. The main thing is that you should pay more attention to never repeated dial. In addition, to facilitate the viewing of the battery data by multiple parallel connections, some battery suppliers can use the corresponding dial to realize the possibility of checking the battery data of multiple batteries on the host computers, which is very convenient and easy for dealers to install and setting. The third factor that cannot be ignored on the hardware part is to select the corresponding protocol on the inverter. As we know, now so many inverter brands can communicate with so many batteries brands, so the key to communication is to select the communication codes of the corresponding protocol on the inverter side, which is mainly through the LCD interface of the inverter or the app terminal. Sometimes we will face another situation like the inverter can communicate with the batteries on both the CAN and RS485 communication ports. You should know that the communication code will be different. For example, for the communication for MeritSun battery and Growatt inverter, the communication code for the CAN communication port is L51, and the communication code for RS485 communication port is L01. This is quite common and should be paid attention to. In addition to the hardware part, the software part is also very important. As we said before, each factors will affect the recognition of the consistent signal between the battery and the inverter, which will finally affect the communication. While the influence of the software section is more critical, because it can show whether the communication channel is open or not. Only when the communication protocol exists on the software and is selected, all our hardware operations are available. Therefore, we will check whether the battery software systems has the communication protocol via PC and check whether it is selected. And if there is not a protocol on the software, you may also need to contact your engineer to upgrade the software system for you. These are 4 key factors that will affect the communication between inverter and batteries. If you can master these 4 key factors, communication challenge will no longer be an obstacle for you. Try to use these information when you're doing the communication works next time, and feel free to left your thoughts in our comment section. See you next time!